Hello and welcome back. I'm Brandon Cunningham. This is my podcast. We're studying the Bible. Uh, we love reading Scripture. That's what we're doing, and we're glad you're joining us. This is a lesson 14, Genesis 12. It's going to be a little long. I noticed the last one was a little long, but Genesis 11 and 12 have a lot of content in them, so it takes a little bit longer to get through them. So share, comment, tell everybody about it, buy a membership, do all kinds of great things. And the goal is to just get the word of God out. So share this everywhere you go, every platform. We also have a YouTube channel, so go check that out. We're going to read Genesis chapter 12. I'm reading from the New Living Translation, although I will probably bounce back and forth a little bit before we get all the way through it. So let's start out. Actually, we're going to start out in the Complete Jewish Bible because I think it says the first paragraph's a little bit more worded a little bit better. So let's jump right in. Now, Adonai said to Abram. Now, Adonai is just God's, the way they called God. We've replaced it with Lord because of a lot of reasons, but Adonai is what it said in the original. So, now Adonai said to Abram, get yourself out of your country, away from your kinsmen, and away from your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you are to be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, but I will curse anyone who curses you. And by you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. So you may say, well, why does that matter? Then the wording. Well, here's the New Living Translation. First verse, it says, the Lord had said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I like the Complete Jewish version because it's a little bit closer to the original, which is get yourself out of your country. Your father's not going to do it. He's already proven that he went so far, but then he stopped. So what he's trying to tell him is get out, get moving. And I just think, your father's family, it's a little, I don't like the wording, but that doesn't matter that much. So Abram went as Adonai had said to him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai, his brother's son Lot, and all their possessions which they had accumulated, as well as the people they had acquired in Haran. Then they set out for the land of Canaan and entered the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land to the place called Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. Then the Canaanites were then in the land. Adonai appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. So he built an altar there to Adonai, who had appeared to him. He left that place, went to the hill east of Bethel, and pitched his tent. With Bethel to the west and Ai to the east, he built an altar there and called on the name of Adonai. Then Abram traveled on, continuing toward the Negev. And there was a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to stay there because the famine in the land was so severe. Again, this is where translation matters because in the New Living Translation, it says, then at the time, a severe famine struck the land of Canaan, forcing Abram to go to Egypt. He wasn't forced. He chose to. It was his decision. God didn't tell him to do it. So when they came close to Egypt and was about to enter, he said to Sarai, his wife, here now, I know that you are a good-looking woman, so that when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife, and kill me to keep you alive. Please say that you are my sister, so that it will go well with me for your sake, and so that I will stay alive because of you. Then Abram entered Egypt. The Egyptians did notice that the woman was very beautiful. Pharaoh's princess saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. So the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. He treated Abram well for her sake, giving him sheep, cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female slaves, and camels. But Adonai inflicted great plagues on Pharaoh and his household because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that you have done to me? Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her to be my own wife? Now, therefore, here's your wife. Take her and go away. So Pharaoh gave orders concerning him to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. So God makes a covenant with Abraham, tells him to leave Haran, and his father and his other relatives, they're not welcome. He didn't say, like, go try to talk them into going with you. He said, leave them, get away from them. And they're not welcome to come with you. I think since Terach decided against following God, God used Abraham. Partial obedience is disobedience. And I think God said, hey, don't even try to reason with them now, just leave them and keep coming. They know what they did. So we see more of God dividing, electing, and separating. God then issues some promises. He will make Abraham into a great nation. Abraham doesn't deserve it. God just decided to do it. That's where we come in, our grace. God decided it. We didn't deserve it. God will bless those who bless Abraham and curse those who curse Abraham. And so what God does in obedience to what Abraham does in obedience to God will bless others. God is using his obedience for the benefit of other people. Our obedience matters for the benefit of other people. So God expects people to recognize that Abraham is chosen and he is to be respected and honored. Not all of Abraham's descendants will have this special blessing. Abraham came from the line of Peleg, who was divided and elected from the line of Shem, who was divided and elected from the line of Noah, who was divided and elected from the line of Seth, who was divided and elected from the line of Abraham or Adam. That's how that works. They're all very specific how God does this, and it's all his will. So as Abraham has sons, we will see one son divided, elected, and separated from the others. 4,000 years later, more than half the population is represented by Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Abraham is the patriarch of all three of those religions. That's how important Abraham is. More than half the population of the planet believes Abraham is the patriarch to their faith. So the third thing is God will use Abraham to bless all the families of the earth. That's what all of this means. Covenants were used to sell land, make alliances, make war and peace. They were very, very common. The Hebrew word for covenant, though, is berit, and it means to cut or divide. A Brit Milah is a circumcision. There are many uniquely Hebrew concepts, and this is one of them. So we don't really have a good word for it, but much like shalom, we think it means peace, but it really has such a larger meaning than that. Messiah is another one, the anointed one. It's just one of those concepts we don't have a lot of words for or parallels really in the English language. It takes about a third more English words than Hebrew to say the same thing. So Christians believe what is being referred to is our concept of a will, like a last will and testament. That's where we get the concept of a first or Old Testament, New Testament. So why do we still say that instead of Old Covenant or New Covenant? It's mainly out of habit, some ignorance of what a biblical covenant is, and then just tradition. It makes it easier. If I used Jesus's actual name of Yeshua, most people are like, well, what is that? They think Jesus was his original name. So most of it is just out of habit and tradition and that kind of thing. But a biblical covenant is a permanent thing unless it's named to be conditional. It's completely permanent and unconditional. The penalty for breaking a biblical covenant is usually death. But once God makes a covenant, it literally becomes a physical law of the universe, like gravity or the speed of light. It's unchanging. Why is a Greek way of thinking. We like to know why. Why did God do this and why did God do that? But you generally won't find the answer to why in the Bible. God operates in patterns, and he uses patterns to explain how he does things, but he very rarely does he ever explain why. So Satan's fall initiated God changing the way the universe operated. Everything would start to deteriorate and die, with no exceptions. Adam and Eve arrived onto a planet that was already decaying due to Satan's introduction of sin. And all time is the measurement of decay. Our universe is aging, it's deteriorating, it's winding down, it's completing its purpose. And that's what time is. It measures that level of decay. The oldest way of creating a covenant was called cutting a covenant. And in Hebrew, berit, which means cutting or dividing, each side would make a cut and then touch their arms together and let the blood mix, and that's what would signify the covenant. So in time, they decided to start cutting animals because it didn't hurt as much as cutting themselves. So they came up with a better way. So they would cut the animals in half and separate them, and then the people that were entering into the covenant would walk in between the pieces and swear an oath in the name of their God, whichever God they happened to follow. But a covenant was a very serious matter that, basically the penalty was death for breaking the covenant. Salt with bread was usually eaten too as the final event of the covenant ceremony. The making of a covenant was also referred to as the covenant of salt. For example, in Mark 9:50 in the New Testament, for those of you that think I don't follow the New Testament too, I do. In Mark 9:50 it says, Jesus says, have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another. And Christ also tells us, you are the salt of the earth. And even Paul says, let your speech be gracious, always seasoned with salt. Salt is symbolic of peace and unity. So today that covenant says, I will bless those who bless Israel, and I will curse those who curse Israel. That's just a biblical fact. That's part of one of those laws of the universe. So Abraham is the first of a series of men called the patriarchs. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, father, son, and grandson. And we'll expand on that, obviously. But Abraham's family was just as pagan as the rest of the world. They didn't know God. They didn't have any interest in God necessarily. So what Abraham was going to have to do could not be accomplished while remaining with his family. We've all experienced this. Hopefully, if you haven't, it's probably because you're not doing too much outside of the world, away from the world. But they were all thoroughly dedicated to their perverted religion. So they weren't going to listen to Abraham. And this is just more of the pattern of God electing, dividing, and separating. We hate to let things go. It's human nature. Even if those things are weighing us down, we don't want to give them up. Even if they're destroying us, the security of the familiar is better for some reason than the discomfort of the unknown. And separation is just a prerequisite to serving God. We can't stay where we were. That's the way it works. I completely believe God has taken me out of situations for that reason. The separation could also be from friends who find it odd that you're serving Yahweh or God because you're just acting weird. You're not as cool as you used to be. Perhaps the separation must be from a church that was over time, maybe it's lost its first love and God's pulled you out of that church. I've seen that. I've been a part of that. This concept of separation is central to Christ's teachings too. In Luke 14:26, it says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. This is about being prepared to be at odds with the people closest to you. They're going to be the ones that notice it first. So this is Jesus in Matthew 10:34. He says, do not think that I have come to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to set a man against his father, a daughter against his mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, which is really pretty easy to do. And a man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Members of Abraham's household became his enemies because he was called by Yahweh, God, to abandon everything they held dear. Christ came to divide and separate. He recognizes that for some, being set apart is going to be heartbreaking. But he says in Matthew 19:29, and everyone who has left his houses or his brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or farms for my name's sake shall receive many times as much and shall inherit eternal life. Separation must occur because the primary change as a result of our salvation is we have been made holy. And by definition, being holy means set apart. You can't be part of everybody else anymore if you're really saved. You should be outside of that. So by means of accepting the separation, in verse 4, Abraham ratified the covenant simply by leaving Haran and going to Canaan. Abraham fulfilled his side of the covenant. The remainder was all on God. He didn't have to do anything else. So we're at a time about 2000 BC, 350 years since the flood, and millions of people inhabited the earth at this point. And God led Abraham to a specific spot called Shechem, and we're going to learn a lot about Shechem. Shechem is known today as Nablus. It's one of the cities under Palestinian control in the West Bank. And that's also where God actually appeared to Abraham. So they're standing on land worshiping a false god that the actual God appeared on. So in a division he would regret, Abraham went to Egypt. It was Abraham's fear that drove him down to Egypt. God never told him to go. He just did it. And this is a pattern that we're going to see repeated by Jacob a few hundred years later. So Abraham prepared his deception. Sarai was 75 and still a stone cold fox. I mean, she looked really good. So Abraham benefited from this deception. He got a lot of stuff and he stayed alive. But God struck Pharaoh's household, and Pharaoh returned Sarai, let him keep all the stuff, and then orders Abraham to get out because this is a relationship that created so much, but it will also bring the God's line of promise into conflict with Egypt for centuries. And still to this day, there's conflicts with Egypt. So this Pharaoh was at least wise enough not to mess with Abraham or Abraham's God. So he said, hey, get out. I don't know what you're doing, but I don't want it. Now, one of the reasons it was okay to do this in Abraham's mind was self-preservation. This would keep them from killing me. He didn't care about all the other people. He didn't care about his wife, for that matter, or his sister. He just cared about himself. So Abraham, although he's a patriarch, although he's a revered member of our faith and God's line of promise and everything else, he was still just a man. And he made decisions based on being just a man, as we all do. So that's basically Genesis chapter 12. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to hit subscribe, like, love, and sign up to get this in your inbox every week. And we'll talk to you soon. God bless.